Welcome to the Birthwords Podcast, episode number 12. In today's episode, I'll be talking about the powerful role of symbols and imagery.
You're listening to the Birthwords Podcast. Utah-based birth doula and applied linguistics scholar Sarah Pixton digs into the language of pregnancy and birth to help expectant women claim their power as life-giving agents engaged in a praiseworthy work. This podcast aims to promote positive birth paradigms and is not intended as medical advice.
Welcome to today's episode. I've been looking forward to discussing this topic, symbols and imagery. I have a community on Facebook called the Birthwords Community, and one of the first questions I asked this group was, what words anchored you during difficult portions of your pregnancy or labor? And I was struck by a few of the comments. They talked about the powerful images they pulled on or the powerful symbols that they thought of that really gave them strength during their pregnancy and during labor. And as I was reflecting on this, I started thinking about what symbols and images are. And in an early episode of the Birthwords Podcast, episode number 2, Linguistics, I talked a bit about semiosis. Semiosis means a system in which a sign or symbol is used to confer or communicate meaning. And we talked during that episode and a little bit in subsequent episodes about how language is a semiotic system, that words that we use are really just signs that bear meaning and communicate meaning to those who have similar backgrounds and experiences to us. That is one way to think of language, and it's also a useful framework to consider the powerful role of images and symbols. Images and symbols, like words, are semiotic systems. They are a small sign packed with meaning that can communicate to whoever is receiving or using that sign or symbol. For instance, when I asked the question in the Birthwords community group about what anchored you during your pregnancy and labor, when times were hard, what anchored you? One of my fellow doulas responded, I love that you use the word anchored because that's a word that was really powerful. That's a symbol that was really powerful for me during my birth experience. And I talked a little bit more with her about that later and a little more about what anchor meant to her. And that was an important symbol or sign that communicated meaning for her throughout her birth experience and pregnancy as well. Her anchors were in her faith, in her family, in her trust in her body, and they grounded her and gave her the stability that she needed as she prepared for labor and as she went through some of the difficult parts of pregnancy. This was my good friend Julie Frankham, who is one of the amazing doulas behind the VBAC link. And they were on a previous episode of the Birthwords podcast and just have fabulous resources for birth givers who are preparing for a VBAC. And I was so moved by her language that she used as she talked about anchors and how that symbol was meaningful for her. Then in response to the same question, I had two other responses that really struck me. One was another fellow doula who said that the phrase dive down deep was meaningful to her. And I pushed her a little more and asked her more about it because without the background of her experience, I wasn't sure what that phrase meant to her and why it was so meaningful and how that phrase was a sign that carried so much meaning for her. And she told me more about the imagery that was behind it as she said to herself, dive down deep through each contraction. She imagined herself playing in the waves. She talked about how in the ocean, waves can be powerful and they can crash over you and feel really overpowering. But if you want to go deeper and if you want to go through the wave, then you need to dive down below the crest of the wave. And the wave remains just as powerful, but you dive down into the power of it rather than letting it crash over you and overpower you. And I thought that this image was just strikingly beautiful and powerful as I imagined that she would be able to communicate that same meaning as she was experiencing powerful waves from her uterine contractions during her labor. She used that same image of diving down deep into the power of the uterine wave and letting herself find the power there and center herself there rather than letting it crash over her and knock her off balance. And I really appreciated her sharing those thoughts about that powerful image that she used. And this powerful image was shared by Katie Forster, another doula who serves Utah. We are just so fortunate to have so many fabulous doulas serving this area. So thank you, Katie, for sharing your thoughts. And then the last example was from a friend and former client of mine who focused on the phrase, focus on the joy. When things got difficult during her pregnancy and her labor, she focused on the joy, and she knew that that meant the joy of meeting her baby. She also knew that she just has this beautiful perspective of the process and beauty and sanctity of pregnancy and birth. And I think she was able to find power in focusing on the joy of that process of bringing this new little life earthside. And so she further expanded that when she was in labor, she could imagine the word joy, which is a powerful semiotic sign that communicated powerful meaning to her, but even more narrowed in the O in the center of that word. She imagined as her baby's head pressing down on her cervix and opening her and encouraging her to open and release and do the work that she needed to do to birth this beautiful baby boy. And I just really appreciated her sharing her thoughts about the power in the symbol joy, and even on that single letter being a powerful image for her, that O being this shape of both her son's head and her cervix as it opened to welcome him into the world. And this wonderful friend is named Janessa Berg, and I just learned so much from her and so appreciated working with her throughout her pregnancy and birth experience. So I really think that there is just power and beauty in the signs that we use to communicate meaning. Sometimes those are spoken or written words. Sometimes they're images that are hard to put into words. Sometimes they're specific symbols like an anchor. And so if you are an expectant woman listening to this podcast, or if you are supporting a birth giver, I would encourage you to find, or to help your client find, some powerful sign or symbol or image that communicates meaning specific to her that will be powerful and give her strength throughout the discomforts and difficult parts of her journey as a life-giving agent. Thank you so much for listening. Please tune in again next week. Bye.
Did words play an important role in your birth experience? If you're interested in sharing your story on the podcast, go to summitbirthutah.com/birthwords. If you're liking what you hear on the podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you choose to listen. For more resources about harnessing the power of words to benefit the birth experience, visit summitbirthutah.com/birthwords.